Anti-government demonstrations have developed across Iran in recent days. And though they began to subside over the last 24 to 48 hours, at their peak they were active in upwards of 80 different cities, especially in the rural and provincial areas. They began in earnest in the city of Mashhad on December 28th. And there are some indications that in that city, which is a conservative, hardline stronghold politically, that some conservative officials nudged demonstrators to protest against the economic policies of President Hassan Rouhani, who is viewed as a moderate reformist. But those economic grievances aired in those initial protests quickly spread out into anti-government sentiment at large, and those protests spread out across the country, including in the capital, Tehran. When we think about the economic grievances that Iranians are upset about, we have to look at issues like inflation, especially unemployment, which has grown quite high in the country, especially among youth and especially in rural areas. We also have to look at corruption, misuse of state funds, as well as the funding of military campaigns abroad, when Iranians, especially in the poor, working and middle class, really want those funds to be used for development projects within their own communities and cities. When we look at how these protests are going to change and moving forward, we have to consider the fact that there's not really a clear leadership or political movement that they can coalesce around. There is not something similar to the 2009 Green Movement when there were very clear officials that protesters were gathered around. That doesn't mean that the sentiment being aired in these protests is not a very serious issue that the government has to contend with. We're going to have to see some sort of answers to the economic grievances that Iranians are airing in these protests, lest more protests continue to develop and potentially become more organized. This means that the pressure on Hassan Rouhani's administration moving forward, despite the fact that he was just re-elected to a second term, is going to increase. And the disappointment over what Iranians have reaped from the nuclear deal, which was implemented 2 years ago, and how that hasn't translated into day-to-day improvements in people's normal lives, that is going to increase as well.